right, cool.
I am going to record the call and we'll distribute it afterwards. So keep that in mind. And thanks for joining us. My name is Ray Champion. I'm the membership champion at conveners.org. Very happy to have you here. And my colleague Sarah Joy is here as well. And I'll have her introduce herself.
Hi, Sarah Joy. I know most of you.
I was going to say, it's a redundant introduction.
I'm one of the co-founders of conveners.org and super excited to be like getting these member calls like back up to the productivity that we've had in the past. We want to get our community activated again. You all have so much to offer each other and so much to offer the rest of the ecosystem. We're super excited.
Yeah, and this conversation is a follow-up on a conversation that we didn't mean to have last time, but did. And Topher was there and we talked. We're talking about Giving Tuesday, but the conversation sort of segued into apps, and so we thought, well, let's seize the moment and really talk about apps because I think it's something that we are all sort of grappling with as conveners. And so before we get started, I'd love to just hear who's with us on the call today. And so I'd love for you to just say your name, what organization you're from, and in the spirit of the conversation, we'd love to hear one app that you love and one app that you would never use again. And I am going to pass it I'm just going to go down the list of participants as I see it. So Topher, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Ray. So app bashing, it's a new thing. So I'm Topher Wilkins. I run Opportunity Collaboration. Also on the board of conveners. And we use Pathable. It's like the thing that we've used forever. And it's fine. It's great. It's really useful in terms of creating this like robust, easy to navigate delegate roster and agenda. But we stripped away a lot of the functionality from it in terms of it also being a communication tool for people. And there's all sorts of reasons why we do that. But it's I think it's interesting to note that it's we're probably using it for like 30% of what it was designed for. And yet that 30% is super useful for us. And then an app that I would never use, man. I'm just making sure there's no app developers on the call before.
We've screened the call for app developers. It's a safe space.
I would say it's not intended as like bashing, but like one of the best things we can do is to like help people avoid the mistakes we've made in the past or that we've seen made in the past.
Yeah. I mean, there was one that we tried with OC a while back. I can't remember what it was called now, where it was supposed to be like a matchmaking app where it'd be like, if you work on this, this, and this, or care about this, this, and this, then you should also know these, other people. Total failure. Like didn't come even close to realizing it's, what we were told it was supposed to do. I think the AI or the algorithm behind that was woefully lacking in the sense of like the connections that we're suggesting were just super basic, like, oh, you also work on poverty, in the context of OC. You should meet this person. I was like, well, you should know every person based on that metric. So, man, I wish I knew what it was. I haven't heard of it or seen it since anywhere else. So it probably just died on the vine. Like it should have.
That's what happens to apps. Yeah. That's great. Thanks.
I will add, I've experienced Wova a couple of times recently. For anyone who knows that one, getting a thumbs up from Elaine. I was at Social Venture Circle last week. They use the app. It's helpful. It's good. I have some qualms with it, but not very many.
Awesome.
WHOVA.
And Pathable are the two apps that have been thrown out thus far. Thanks, Topher. Megan, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Megan Kennedy from the Global Philanthropy Forum, which is a special project of World Affairs. And we actually use Whova as our conference app, and it's very simple, but that's kind of what we like about it. Very user-friendly. I think there's, a bunch of extensions you can add to make it more complex, but just kind of the basic package has always been really good for us. And that's kind of the app we've used all the way along. So I don't have any negative examples to share, thankfully.
That's great. Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for joining the call. Connor.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Connor. I work at New England International Donors, And we are just now experimenting with apps, so we don't have a lot of expertise in the area at all. We've used Eventbrite apps for a while and also Wova a little bit, but as far as negative experiences, we don't have any because we're very limited. So,
and just to clarify, this doesn't have to be only things that you've personally, you can also give examples of things you've seen you done or experienced at other convenings. So.
Most of my experience is around Wova and Eventbrite, honestly. So not very vast experience over here.
Lots of Wova experience in this group. Aaliyah, how about you?
Hi, I'm Aaliyah. I'm representing Aparna Ray and Jessica Walker Beaumont from Moving Beyond and Future for Us. And I would say the apps that both companies use the most would probably a lot of the social media, since we are a startup, getting the word out, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. And also probably a good part is MailChimp as we build our database. As far as apps we do not like, they have not mentioned that to me. So, and I think we're just in that trial period of what is best fit for the company.
That's great. Hopefully there'll be lots of learning for you in this call as you hear from apps that other folks have used.
Absolutely.
Elaine. Oh, Elaine, you're still muted.
Okay. We're big fans of Sked, HubSpot, Slido, and Clockify. So Clockify is an app that helps you, I don't want to say time management, but have an analysis of how you're spending your time, particularly when it comes to, contracts that you're trying to write and proposals that you're trying to write and any consulting, so all of your calls that you would have leading up to a deliverable, so being able to track that. But even just like how much time am I spending with the accountant? How much time am I spending in staff meetings, so that we can have a better analysis of like how we're spending our staff's time. And apps that I am not fond of and would personally love to be erased from the universe is Slack.
Wow.
Ray, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was going to say we're going to have to dive deep into that, Elaine, because we just started using Clockify at Conveners and we use Slack heavily. So I'd love to hear later on if there are any alternatives you have to Slack. We have a new caller on the line, and so we're just getting started and we're just going around and introducing ourselves. We're saying our organization, our name, organization, one app that we've used and really like, and one app that we've used in the convening space that we may not ever use again. And my name is Ray Champion. I'm the membership champion here at Conveners. So if you could just introduce yourself and we will label you accordingly.
Hi, it's Melanie Nowaski. I'm with Feeding America. Apologize, I joined late. I could not get the Zoom to work on my computer. So we are very limited in our app usage. The only one I have to offer is core apps that we use for our conferences. For attendees, that's primarily all that we've been using. So I don't have any to add in terms of the downside or negative.
That's great. And that's come up a few times with others. So hopefully there'll be some lessons learned for you here in this conversation. And I should also note that we have a couple folks from Fair Trade who will be joining us probably halfway through the call. They have another call that conflicts with this. So I'll introduce them when they join. In terms of the quote unquote agenda today, it's very light. This is going to be a discussion. And so I'd love to just hear from folks and also just have it be a free-flowing conversation. But in terms of structure, the way that we wanted to divide it is thinking about apps you're using prior to your convening, apps that you are using while you're convening, is in session, and then things that you would sort of use as follow-up for feedback, etc. And so I'd love to start with apps that you're using pre-convening. And again, you probably might be using one app that fits all these purposes. That's fine. But I'd love to start the conversation by hearing any experiences that folks have setting up their convenings, pre-convening, and any work that you've done in apps prior to your actual meeting. And you can just jump in.
So this is Elaine. So one that, well, one, our CRM system is HubSpot. So that's pretty powerful. Is what we are able to do in HubSpot is track all relationships and communications. So even you don't have to necessarily send your communication through the CRM. Even if you're sending it in Gmail, which is what we use, it gets tracked in the CRM. So it's really nice, particularly if Stephanie is having a conversation about sponsorships and then Robin needs to kind of follow up. Robin can see the email chain of the communication that's happened between a particular partner. And now they're always coming up with new integrations. So I just looked on their marketplace and there's like 50 new integrations. So we're really excited about that. I think MailChimp was mentioned. And then Sked, I'm just a big, huge fan of Sked. My staff keeps telling me they should pay me because what's great about it is one is, which I think a lot of these apps have, but what I find with Sked is it's way more affordable, particularly for smaller convenings under like 500 people than some of the options that have been thrown out earlier. It's pretty user-friendly. It has some good analysis. It does a lot of auto sequencing, particularly about moving your site from mobile ready to being a laptop or other devices. So being able to manipulate how your site looks, that's also a really great benefit. But like the really biggest thing is it's super, super affordable. It's super, super easy. And we can send out messages. So like for us, we're trying to get folks to do some work before they get there. But we can upload presentation files. We can do that before, during, and after. So we can tell audiences when they come, we're like, hey, if you want the presentation, we're going to automatically upload it, and people can, and we'll keep it on our site. So you can even embed the conference in Sked onto your website, and so it just looks intuitive. It looks like it doesn't look like you're going to another site. It just looks like it's part of your website. So we're just really big fans of using Sked all the way through our conference process.
Sounds like a fantastic tool, Sked.
And Elaine, can you tell us a little bit more about, like, is that where you build your agenda? Is that where all the like, and are folks able to create their own agendas through that? Can you just tell us more about the features and like what you use it for?
Yes, all those things. So people can build their own schedules. They can link their Twitter account. And actually the way that Sked works, so if you go to our website, our Connect Up MN website, you'll see our Sked from our conference this past June. So you can even see the Twitter feed. It's all part of the visualization. So it's not like you need to add another widget to show your Twitter feed from the event. It's already there side by side with the agenda. Speakers can add files. They can, we can make it so that we could make it so that nobody could post anything, but we choose to make it open so anybody can post anything. So if somebody wants to add a file just to their personal thing of a resource that they provided to the community, that's available. And not only just content that we provide, but if somebody's like, oh yeah, here's a book or here's a website, they can upload that to their personal profile and then share that with everybody there. It also has some really groovy, well, I shouldn't say groovy, but just very simple metrics of like rating the session. So we do paper surveys, but we also know that like one, everybody is not on paper and everybody's not also on a virtual, virtually, they're not accessing it virtually. So for those of them who are accessing it virtually, we still can collect that data of like smiley face, frowny face, meh face. And so in our work conference, we're really mindful of having our room monitors be like, okay, take out your phones and just add a smiley face if you liked the session, frowny face if you didn't like the session, or if you just thought it was mediocre, the meh face. And but we're really mindful of like collecting that data about each session and knowing who to invite next to come back next year.
And how did you spell that? Sked?
Oh, Elaine, sorry, you're muted.
Sked, SCSCHED, is also in the chat box. And they have nonprofit pricing. That nonprofit pricing is not on their website. You have to ask for it, but they do have nonprofit pricing. And it's really like, I think we paid, well, we're grandfathered in, so we have a different rate, but I think if your convening is less than 125 people, I want to say it's $200, $250.
That is very affordable.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And I know we'll get into feedback later, but I think it's super valuable to capture the feedback while the conference is going, because once folks are out the door, you don't know for sure that you're going to get that feedback. So that sounds like an excellent tool. For the folks who've used Whova, any sharing about how you've used that app in the pre-convening space?
This is Megan. We've found that they have a feature where they encourage people to introduce themselves before the conference. And we've seen a lot of engagement that way, and it just gets people really excited for the event and to meet everyone in person.
Could you talk to that a little bit? So is it like a chat function? Can you see pictures? Like, how does it work to create a profile?
Yeah, so essentially you would just create your individual profile, for both speakers and attendees, and then it's kind of like a built-in message board, but specifically for just introducing yourself, just as a way to kind of create a sense of community before the conference even begins.
I love that. I've only seen the apps that, you can converse with other people, but I haven't seen a message board before. Anyone else have experience with Whova? Any other pre-convening apps?
I do like that feature of Whova, and I think with Whova you can also upload pictures, so you can like take pictures at the conference and then upload them, and people can like them and heart them and all that other stuff. So Whova is nice. What does Whova cost? I've never looked into the pricing.
I'd have to go back and check for sure, but I want to say somewhere around 700.
Do you know, do they tier the prices based off of how big your convening is, Megan?
They do, and they do nonprofit pricing, and you get grandfathered in. They sometimes offer discounts for sending out recommendations to others. So they generally are pretty great to work with.
If anyone
so if
wants
anybody's
Whova,
interested in Whova, get it through Megan so they can get a discount.
Right? Yes, please do.
And with both Whova and Sked, is that an annual pricing? Okay.
It is.
Great.
You can do something else, but the other thing that I like about Sked as opposed to Whova is that what my experience has been is I don't have to, I don't have to keep, each conference is separate. Like, so if I go to different conferences, I keep having to download Whova for each one of those conferences, and then it takes up space on my phone. But I want to keep that because I use that to follow up with people. So that's the other nice thing about Sked is like we can just keep it on our website and people don't have to keep it on their phone, and they can constantly, they can go back to it and keep accessing it.
that's brilliant. Connor, if you're still there, I'm curious, or sorry, Topher, if you're still there, I'm curious to hear about Pathable and any ways that you use that in the pre-convening space, if at all.
I think he may have had to step away. I would love to know, what do people use for registration? Because I've seen a lot of different systems used for registration and a lot of pain around those. So does anyone have anything that they have loved for registration, or that they are like, we would love to get off of this?
So we use Eventbrite because it not only speaks to Sked, but also ties to our CRM.
And so far that's worked well for you at the scale that you're at, and it's like
It's a little clunky. You know, I would like it to be a little bit more seamless, particularly, you know, and it's expensive. I mean, I shouldn't say expensive. Like, there's a high transaction cost, and we've actually looked at other integrations that we can use that have lower transaction costs, but they're not as user friendly, nor can we brand them. So that's the nice thing about Eventbrite. You can do a little bit of branding within it, as opposed to some of the other options that I've seen that are emerging that are just like either the colors are not aligned or just the usability just isn't like. But even with Eventbrite, I find there are all these little niches of where you like that if you're not aware, like when I have to train new people and I'm like, okay, so you have to go in and you need to like go here to put in the email that goes out when somebody confirms. Here's where you go to put in the message for when somebody's waitlisted. And like, so having to remember, like having to have somebody, so we've had to create a manual, which is more work, so that people don't forget all of those little extra little places where things need to go, because it's not necessarily intuitive when you're looking at the navigation on the left side of Eventbrite.
Anybody have alternatives of things that have worked maybe on that, you know, for smaller convenings? What has worked well besides Eventbrite? Maybe nobody likes their registration system.
I've seen a lot of people use Paper Bag. I think Paper Bag was used for CoCap. I've gone to a few different events who use Paper Bag. It looks like it can't be branded, but the pricing is less expensive per ticket price. So I think that's another option for folks.
Okay, interesting.
Any other apps that folks are using in the pre-convening space before we move on to when the convening is in session? Elaine, it's interesting that you bring up Eventbrite, and I think the one benefit I can think about is that it's familiar to most folks. At least we've all filled out an Eventbrite sort of registration form, so at least for your participants, it's going to feel second nature for them to sign up for it. Whether or not they like that or not, it's going to be a different conversation. But I think, you know, Eventbrite, it does have that sort of brand familiarity in the event space. That's super helpful. Let's shift into talking about while the convening is in session. So communicating with attendees, the schedule. Elaine, I think we talked to this a little bit earlier, but would love to hear thoughts that folks or apps that folks are using while the convening is going on.
Ms. Elaine, I'll go. So in Sched, one, we can send out messages to folks in advance. We can upload a spreadsheet. So if we know it's a controlled event, we can actually upload a spreadsheet. You can even, oh, this is the thing I love, you can upload a spreadsheet of your program into Sched, and it'll populate your agenda, your schedule from a spreadsheet. So we have a Google workbook that houses our whole entire conference, and each tab obviously represents a different part of the conference, and it just rolls up. And so we can take each one of those sheets, and we can, like with the speakers, we could upload our whole speaker sheet right up into Sched. So that's really cool. And we can send messages just to our speakers. We can send messages just to the attendees. But then also sending messages like, hey, it's going to be raining tomorrow, or there's going to be extra traffic tomorrow. We can send that message out to folks. And we can schedule messages. So some of those messages like, hey, it's day 2, blah, 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 blah. Be sure to check your schedule. Like, we can pre-populate those even before the conference. So those will send out. The only downside is you can't, once you've scheduled it, you can't edit it. So if you made a mistake, like, that's it. But the other thing that we like to use at the conference, and Avery introduced me to this, is Slido. which is a presentation app platform that you can interact with your phone and your laptop or a mobile device, as well as get immediate audience participation. So even if you wanted to know, like, hey, who's in the room? Entrepreneurs, investors, founders, foundations. You can put that pre-populated and then just have people use their phone to like answer in real time in response without having to stop the convening to like, do whatever. So we really love Slido, and whenever we show it to people, they're like, "Ooh, witchcraft!" They're like, "This is amazing."
It does look like magic if you've never used it before.
So I try to use Slido. Even my facilitations, when I get hired to do facilitations, whenever possible, I try to use Slido. It's amazing.
We're all looking for that wow factor. Anyone else? Elaine, when you brought up the notifications, I recently attended the Net Impact Conference, and they use an app called Bizzaboo, and here I'll put it in the chat, but that's something that they definitely use a lot. Is you could tell that some of the notifications were pre-scheduled, which is great. I advise someone what to do in the evening. Here's the places to go for dinner. They would also highlight some of the events that were happening the next day, so I thought that was a really, really brilliant app. And I know Topher brought up earlier that he uses Pathable, and if he's not on the call, and I can speak a little bit to it because I've used Pathable as well. And I know one of the great things that Topher brought up in the last call that's good about Pathable is that they will customize the app for you, and you can work with them to help build out some of your functionality. And so I know that Topher has spent a little bit of time like building out some of the features in terms of communication, and they've helped them with that. So I think that's one of the unique things about these apps is that there's the foundational level, and then there's like, will the developer work with you to help build those custom features? And it sounds like Pathable is definitely flexible in that way.
And I love Pathable. It's just a little out of our price market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully Topher can come back in, because I'd love to get just like a kind of a baseline of what to expect if you're going to go with Pathable. One of the things that I'd like to dive a little deeper on is, how do you help participants connect with each other while they're at your conference, like while they're actually physically there? And what functions are available in these different apps that do that well, and which aren't? One of the things that I've noticed is that I've been to several convenings that have essentially the way that they talk about it is they have their own app. And I think what that usually means is that there's been some kind of customization or some like inputting of content into a standard sort of app. I have never had one of those that worked the way it was supposed to. Has anybody else? No, Elaine's shaking her head. So I think it's really tempting to go to say like that's the best solution is we just need our own. We need it to do what we want it to do, how we want it to do it. And I think it is really tempting to go that direction. My sense from going to multiple conferences that have their own app is that in order for that to actually work, you've got to do it on a kind of a grand scale. Skoll is the one exception that I can name, that their app actually does function in and contributes to the unique environment that is Skoll. And even then, and they've put a lot of resources into that app. And even then, it doesn't do everything they'd like it to do. and I would say it's honestly in some ways behind some of these simpler, more standardized tools. And I think that what both Elaine and Topher, and I think a couple of other people, now I can't remember, I'll have to go back to the notes to figure out who it was, but brought up this concept of paring down the functionality of these apps to actually get what's useful for your context. And I think that's a really smart move. Rather than try to build something from scratch that does what you need it to, take a broader tool and then just strip away things until you get to the two things that represent the core of how you work. And one of the things that Topher brought up to us when we were having this conversation earlier was that they very intentionally removed some of the core functionality of Pathable. Like Pathable is designed to let people talk to each other and to connect with each other. And because of the way that OC functions, and because of particularly of Topher's role in that community and the benefit that that community gets from having Topher in that role, they took away that functionality. They stripped it out entirely. And that made that app meet their needs a lot more effectively than either leaving it just the way it was and using all of its functionality would, or then building their own. What if that?
I would say this, I would add two things. So one, I think the one sort of, we use this at an organization I was before this organization, which is Salesforce. So Salesforce has expanded the capacity, and there is a nonprofit free version with some pretty robust capacity. I just found like when we were using it, it was a Maserati and we needed a Prius, right? So and with the nonprofit starter pack, you don't, one, the language isn't intuitive because it's built for a business platform, and so some of the language, an enterprise platform, it doesn't translate well to a nonprofit, right? So they call something an opportunity, which is, for me, not intuitive, versus a donor or versus an attendee, somebody who's gone to your conference. The other thing, to your point, Sarah Joy, is that we have here in town, we have Bush Foundation. They do a conference called Bush Connect, which is also very much grounded in relationship building. But when you go to the app that one shows people's connectivity and their degrees of separation, one, trying to go through the app on your phone is a horrible experience. And then on the website, the way that it's built is you have to keep scrolling down, but then you lose everything that you see on top. So to your point of like, it just doesn't really work well, and it just doesn't feel good because, and as we know, like if it doesn't feel good, you're not going to use it. So just to sort of put a pin in what you were saying about people overbuilding things, and that was something they built from the ground up with some local service providers here in town, and I was just like, I don't know, this is when you don't have real users giving you input on whether the usability of something is, that can be the challenge. That can cause you problems in actually how it looks to the user on the other side when you get done.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for putting a pin in that, Elaine. I want to introduce Billy, who just joined us on the call. Hey, Billy, how are you?
Good. Hi, all. Sorry for my delay.
It's okay. I warned them that you were going to be coming in halfway through, so no problem at all. We are just in the middle of our conversation, but I'd love to hear you just introduce yourself, your name, organization you're from. And right now we're talking about apps that we use while the convening is ongoing. And so if you have any apps that you use for registration or communication while your convening is ongoing, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Billy Linstead Goldsmith. I'm the Director of Fair Trade Campaigns, which is the grassroots consumer engagement and activation program at Fair Trade USA. As far as apps, we hold a national conference every year. The last couple of years, we've used, we went with like a mobile responsive site instead of an app. But we, for this one coming up in late March, have signed on with Whova. So we are, kind of deep in with their team in terms of how we optimize the app on the front end, but the event isn't until late March. So we've heard good things. I experienced it. I'm on the board of an organization that used it for their annual summit last year, and I was really impressed on site. We're just trying to figure out, they have a huge suite of tools and widgets you can optimize in there, and to the point that was just made by you, Elaine, I mean, you can build something with so many cool things that nobody uses it because it's overwhelming with, even though the options and the bells and whistles are beautiful and intriguing, there is such thing as too many of those. So we're just trying to make sure we pick and choose the right ones that will drive, integration and connectivity within the event itself, but also at the end gives us the opportunity to kind of keep people connected and keep people engaged longer term.
That's great, Billy. Thanks for sharing. And that app has come up a lot in this conversation already. And so it might be helpful for folks if anyone has experience with Woovo and they're using any of those plugins or apps, is there anything that you found particularly useful that Billy might want to consider as he's planning out his convening in late March? Can't remember who on the calls had experience with it before. Maybe Megan?
Yeah, this is Megan. We have used it for the past couple of years, but kind of as to reiterate the point, we've tried not to use too many of the widgets and just keep it really clean and user friendly, because I think it does get overwhelming both on the organizer side and the attendee side. So I think you're on the right track to try to keep it simple.
Yeah, we love its like the functionality in terms of how it relates to the website we have for the conference, where you can just enter everything through the app and it automatically populates your website is fantastic. So that's the stuff we've been playing with the most on the back end. But yeah, to your point, I mean, for the user experience, we want it to be something that, you know, can foster those connections, but not be so overwhelming. It's, you know, you're drowning in the app.
Topher, we just had Billy join us, and we were talking a little bit about Pathable and wanted to maybe hear a little bit about your experience using Pathable in the pre-convening space and also in the registration while the conference is ongoing, if possible.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay, Ray?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay,
good. Yeah, and I had to step out for a little bit, but I was listening in to everything that was said. So, so the question is, how do we engage with Pathable before and during OC?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So OC is in October every year, and we actually launch our they call it a community, Pathable community, sometime around January or Feb, when we have a pretty good critical mass of people already enrolled for October. And that is live on our website and publicly accessible in terms of the people who are currently planning on being an OC. Everyone has an individual profile. They can, I think Elaine was mentioning this, they can upload documents to their profile. They can customize that sort of ad nauseum. And it's a searchable roster. So you can enter into keyword searches. You can, we've tagged people against the SCGs and geographic focus areas and all these great filters to make sure that people can readily find the right folks. In addition to the roster, we also launched the agenda sometime around like April, May, that time frame in advance of October, when we start to see a critical mass of session proposals coming in. And similar to the roster, that's publicly available. So, you know, one of the things I love about Pathable is that it is a pretty darn user-friendly, aesthetically pleasing, easily manageable platform for our roster and our agenda, like the two major pieces that need to be customized every year. And they can live on the site and, of course, sort of integrate with the rest of our scaffolding, the sort of scaffolding of the OC site. And then during OC, I don't know, some people use it. I saw one woman in particular using it a lot this last month. But I think the major divergence is that it's people are able to connect with each other in the context of OC well beyond the app. And to the extent that OC de-emphasizes people being on their phones and their computers and their tablets in the first place, like we wanted to make sure that there's all sorts of ways that folks to find each other and connect during the week that didn't require them to be staring at a screen. So, you know, this was shared before, Sarah Jo, you mentioned this, but like we stripped away all the communication capability that Pathable has, where it's like you can ping somebody and be like, hey, can we start a conversation or can we set up a meeting? Like we just totally dismantled all of that. And instead simply relied on it for this agenda and delegate roster functionality, which it's exceptionally good for, we've found. It's also expensive, to Elaine's point. I think we pay like $5,000 a year to use this thing. I know, it's kind of absurd. I know, the heck.
Whoa,
so I am going to check out Sked, Elaine, for that reason. Like if it's a viable alternative,
Whova is very reasonably priced. Also, I was amazed at the price point.
Yeah, cool.
One other thing about
can Wova integrate into a web app? Like could it exist on our website during the year?
You know, I would think so. You know, we have a separate like microsite for our conference, for our event, and it fully integrates into that. But that's again, we enter all of like the speaker bios and all that info. Like speakers get a link and they enter their bio and headshot and all of that. It goes into the app, and via the app, it goes right to the conference website. But we have not tried to integrate it with our main organizational website.
Okay.
So I know it can integrate online. I just don't know if the functionality it optimizes for that connection makes sense with a regular website. But I mean, I'm sure they would be more than happy to answer those questions.
Megan, has it turned out for you guys in terms of how you connect?
We haven't tried to do it, so I'm not sure.
And Topher, I'm happy to walk you through the back end. And anybody else who's interested, I'm happy to walk you through the back end so you can kind of really kick the tires and look under the hood.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I mean, what I'm fearful of going somewhere else is the fact that the Pathwell roster and agenda are essentially huge sales tools for us. Like we point people there all the time when we're trying to drum up interest and registrations for OC. So there's some very critical components there. Like it has to be able to live on the site, for example, it has to be publicly viewable. Like, yeah, there's some things that would be complete deal breakers if we went elsewhere. But Elaine, I will actually take you up on that because it's a good time to do that right now.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is custom that you all do, Topher, is that on your website, I like that there are different, folks are separated into different focus areas. Is that something that you all do custom, or is that something that's already built to the app?
In like SDG issue area, stuff like that. So it's a functionality that Pathwell provides, and that you can set different different search filter criteria. So like we have geographic focus, we have SDG /issue area. I think you could add as many as you want, and then you can also predetermine, like for the SDGs, for example, it's like there's 17. So we're not going to allow someone to say I'm interested in SDG 23. It's like you set the 17, and then that's what people can select from. Same with geographic focus, like you can select North America, Africa, Latin America, and then leave that. And there's some, and then you also have the ability as an administrator to say it's up to people to tell, to assign themselves their own tags, like their own issue tags that they want to associate themselves with.
I would be
so yeah,
interested
it's
to know,
definitely, it's built in.
Yeah, who's had experience with, because to a large degree, the usefulness of a roster, especially if you're in a larger convening where it's not just 100 people that you could, that feels a little more manageable. When you get into several hundred people, a lot of the value of these comes with the amount of information that people put in about themselves. And at least, Topher, I hope I'm not like outing you in some ways, but we had a work trade with one of our team members to actually go through and do that tagging because people weren't doing it themselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of the value comes from that tagging. Has anyone had any experience with how to engage a community in order to provide that kind of information, or other ways to get around it, like OC did?
Well, I'll just jump in real quick. Whenever somebody registers for OC, part of the registration form is people answering 3 major prompts, and then obviously their organization, their title, and that kind of stuff. And then all that stuff we populate their Pathwell profile with proactively without them even having to do that. And then we send them a link that says, hey, look, if you want to customize it further, you can. And yes, thank goodness Janine Becker of conveners.org was willing to help people associate the SDGs to their profiles as well. It's super, super helpful. But I think the point is, like, we built into our registration system, a lot of the info we think people would want to know at the sort of minimal viable product level, and then proactively populate people's profiles with that.
That's great. And I'll also throw out, sorry, Elaine.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say yes to all the things that Topher said. And I think we're in a little bit of a different situation just because the attendees are incentivized to give that information because we're connecting entrepreneurs and investors in the ecosystem. Um, it's to your advantage to like make sure that you're filling those things out. And we even go a step further of saying, hey, we encourage you to get a t-shirt with your logo on it so people know when you come like who you are, right? And so they can connect the face with the name. And so but Topher's right of just really making that proactive on the registration end to while people are registering, because then they're already in that mode of thinking about it, and then the system being able to just integrate that, and you don't have to do that. And then you're only following up on those people who didn't do that. But we're also super annoying. Like we're going to keep bugging you about this until you do it. And so they're just like, I want to stop getting emails from Elaine. So
another incentive.
Well, and I think that's the key point that I heard there is that if you want this information from people, make sure that there is a value that you can point to for them to provide that.
And I've thrown out this app earlier, Bizzabo or Bizzaboo, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but during the conference, it has a really great chat function. But one thing that I'll point out for anyone who might be considering it, which I was quite surprised by, is that I was sort of casually perusing and looking at some of the attendees, and then it notifies people when you've looked at their profile. So when they started looking at mine, I thought, well, what's happening here? So I think it's unique. I mean, sometimes you want to know, sometimes you don't want to know, but that is something to keep in mind. And maybe I haven't used Bizzabo myself. I use it at the Impact conference, but I wonder if that's something that could be removed on the back end, is that sort of communication piece, but maybe a little bit too much information shared there.
We are getting toward the end of this, but I want to throw out that Twitter walls, our social walls, are often a really great way to get interaction during the conference and to kind of highlight people interacting in different ways. And they just get projected up onto a screen. So there's apps that allow you to curate which ones get kind of floated to the top. And those I've seen I've seen people actually interact with those in really interesting and useful ways. One of the other kind of as a theme that I've noticed is that my gut would be to let your strategy around apps that are used during the conference be really flexible. Because when we were preparing for this call, I went through and was thinking about the apps that I had seen 5 years ago, and 90% of them don't exist anymore. And so I think this is an area where things come and go really quickly.
Yeah.
And to not like build those things, like don't bake them into your strategy, just kind of use them as they're useful.
Another one we've used that we've gotten a lot of mileage out of is Mentimeter, like even during like plenary sessions. And in fact, we used it one time. The word cloud was so compelling that we captured it and put it on like, mugs and like swag that we sent to like speakers as thank you gifts and things like that, because it was like empowerment was like the big word in the middle and all these incredible words. So that's one that we've used both for things like that, but also kind of polling the audience and getting feedback and things like that. And it can be free or very low cost.
That's great. We have about 7 minutes left, and so I want to be able to capture that last bit. So we've talked about apps you're using pre-convening, during the convening, and so I'd love to chat a little bit about after you're convening. How do you keep folks connected? What apps are you using to collect feedback?
So we employ, to Sarah Joy's point, a lot. So we have Typeform. One, because it's always just looks really fun when you get a Typeform post-event survey, but there's also one that comes with Sked. So we have the Sked one that goes out like literally the day after the conference. Typeform, it's a little more nuanced and relational, so we're able to get a different kind of set of data through Typeform. But the reason why we were using those is because we didn't have that capability with HubSpot. So now that HubSpot has forms, we can create forms in HubSpot, but the only challenge that you have to be what we have found that we need to be really mindful of is, as with any database, how many custom fields you're building. And so if there's particular data that you're trying to get to, you're adding that now to your database, right? And so just from a database management perspective of being mindful of how many custom fields am I building, because we have the free version of HubSpot. So we only have a limited number of custom fields with our free version without having to go up in pricing. So, and I'm sure just from a database management perspective, even if you have a paid version, they're going to limit you on how many custom fields you have. So really getting super clear about what's the data we want to capture more longitudinally versus what is the data that we want to capture in isolation of that particular event. So for us, it's about, we are trying to capture people's commitments. So if it's an investor and they're like, we've said in our conference, I want to commit to spending $1,000 with an entrepreneur from the underestimated community in the next 12 months, like that's a concrete thing. And we can be like, okay, in 6 months, have you moved the needle on this commitment? Right? Versus, and that might actually be something we do in Typeform as opposed to adding that into our database because we can't necessarily track that longitudinally in our database without causing a whole bunch of programming problems. Oh, and
we use go ahead, Elaine.
No, so I dropped off the tail end of it. So what we do with Typeform then is in that big workbook that I was telling you, how we house the whole conference, the responses from that we turn into a CSV file, and then we add that to our workbook. So we really have a full comprehensive story of the conference. Even the survey responses are in that workbook. So anything, if you want to know anything about the conference, it'll be in that workbook.
Elaine, I need to see your pre and post conference workflow because you've got a lot of apps going on there and they all sound like they're talking to each other. That's great.
Actually, if you'd be willing to share like a stripped out version of that workbook, I think that would be really useful for a lot of people.
And I missed the beginning. Elaine, what organization are you with?
Social Impact Strategies Group.
So as an organization, we use a lot of just Google Forms, like super simple, super easy. And it, you know, they often, I think, Elaine, to your point, it's a matter of what you need the data for. Like, is it something that you need in your database, or is it something that you need to process and attach to the document and then move on?
I'm cognizant of the fact you guys only have a couple minutes left, and one of the main reasons I was interested in this conversation in particular was, has anyone found a viable solution for continuing conversations post-conference in an online digital realm? Like I can't tell you how many times people have approached me and said, oh, we need something that allows us to stay connected in an online way after OC so that all these great conversations can continue, partnerships continue to be built, that there's like a online community essentially for it. Has anyone else found success there?
I will just say yes and no. So then the yes part is, you know, when people call us with that same question, we're like, go back on Sched. It's all there. Go to our website. It's all there. And they'll like, oh, I was talking to somebody and I don't remember who they were. I was in that session, and like, go to Sched. It's still up. You can go. But for the ongoing piece of it, you know, people just drop off, right? They drop off. And so to that piece of it of like, what happens as far as like, we want to continue having these three people want to continue having a conversation, and they're in different states. Like, I've not found a platform that is really kind of being able to like, hey, here's Zoom that connects to the conference, and you can set up a conference room if you want to have a quick conversation, right? Like, I have not seen that.
Unfortunately, Topher, my short answer is I've seen a lot of things tried and none of them have worked.
Yeah.
I've seen wikis, I've seen little communities, I've seen Facebook groups, I've seen LinkedIn groups, I've seen there's a lot of things that I've seen tried and they haven't worked. I will say that as an organization, conveners.org has its eye on 3 different kind of network tools that are being created right now. One of them is called H360 from the Hatch Group. One of them is Savannah. And the third one, I just blanked on its name.
It's not Village Creed, is it?
No, it's We Changers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, We Changers. And we're pretty closely involved with each of those groups and are like putting those apps through their paces, because all 3 of those purport to be a solution to this issue. But we want to really test them out and see if there's something that we can comfortably recommend.
Yeah, we've tried things that just haven't worked. So I know, and Ray was just with us at this convening that we hosted, that we're trying to foster ongoing dialogue and ongoing engagement. And right now our strategy is to hope that we can encourage people to connect, not as a whole group, not as a whole cohort, but where people found synergies, and do our best to report back on that happened, so we can at least quantify that there are ongoing engagements coming out of it, as well as the ones that we're going to be fostering directly, right? So part of our strategy right now, given that we don't have one of these 3 that you mentioned, Sarah Joy, and it sounds like that's you're kind of piloting that, is just to kind of let go of knowing what's happened and try to focus more on capturing that things did happen, so that we at least know that this is ongoing. And then, collecting, even if it's anecdotally, just, some insight into what has come about because of, us bringing this convening together.
Billy, can I ask really quickly what you tried that didn't work?
I mean, we have we have a forum on our website. Like all forums, it just, you have to basically cajole and entice people to participate and plug in. We tried a Google group. We tried a couple of, what I will say that we've had more success with is finding the most engaged people and trying to organize, like a quarterly call that we just put on the calendar. And then, via Zoom, just invite people and invite them to invite people. So again, that's the most engaged. We kind of know who to expect on those. And, bringing new people in through connections that they've made has been a little bit successful with that. But again, just the online or app solution, we just haven't. And that's the idea, right? Is that's the low touch, easy to opt in, easy to participate way to do it. And I don't know if it's just because the space is too crowded, or we just haven't found the right mix of technology that connects people in the right way outside of these. Because I think it's also, there's such an obvious disparity of when everybody's in the room and all that, that energy and creativity and all of that is going on, and then you're just not, and it's hard to bridge that, that real feeling of connection from, a weekend or several days of exciting collaboration to then, we're all off in our own world in different spaces, different cities, in our work.
So I just remembered something that might speak to Topher's request, which is that Minnesota Council on Foundations here, I know they use Salesforce and they use forums, and I have seen those be pretty active, but one of the things that I would say that's distinctly different than what I've experienced in the past is they have a staff person for each one of those forums who's responsible for either activating or posting, and then that actually sparks conversation with people who are interested in that particular affinity topic. So there was that, and then what was the other thing I was going to share with you? I should have written it down. Yeah, so I'll just end it there unless I remember what the other thing was.
Yeah, Billy, I often say that until holographic technology is there, it's just never, Facebook group is never going to replace an offline convening.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing that I wanted to share, because I think where your convening is very similar to ours, Topher, is that you need to measure the relationship and the impact, right? And so how do you do that? So one of the things that we have found is just really, one, we created a text network, And so we've had people, so the platform is called Slick Text, and there's a few, I'll type it in the thing here. And with Slick Text, what we can do, we're still kind of figuring out like the best way to use it, but we can create segments. So we can segment entrepreneurs and investors, and we can have people opt in to which group that they want to be in. And then we're crafting messages. We tell people you're never going to get more than 4 messages a month from us on our text network. And one, it's an opportunity where we try to get our entrepreneurs to be like, hey, give us a discount or a program or like a promotion that we're going to send out to the whole network. So it incentivizes them to like keep us connected, but also like, hey, sending them a regular message of like, what is there somebody that you talked to that you met at Connect Up? You know, and we just send that regular message like every month. And so sometimes they respond and they're like, oh yeah, like I got an order from somebody, or Elaine introduced me to somebody, or, you know, so we're trying to capture a couple of things. One, we're trying to capture a competence quotient and an impact quotient. So this is our way of just trying to figure out like, how can we quantify those touches, which are very more gushy.
That's great.
Do your guys' events have like a remote access kind of digital participation component? I've actually presented as a speaker at an all digital conference, and that platform was, I'd have to figure out what it was. I could find out pretty easily. That platform was really impactful and useful for a large group. And so I was just thinking that for post convening or post in-person meeting, that something like that might be effective. And then I also just say that as we think about every year, how many air miles and how much emissions are involved with people coming to our event, that, from a sustainability perspective, how can we make it more accessible for people, both from accessibility from a cost perspective, but also from an environmental impact perspective. So didn't know if you guys have any pieces like that in your events.
Not at OC.
That's a really interesting perspective. Please do let us know what that was. We'll make sure it goes out in the notes.
Yeah, the conference is called Elevate. So that it's run by the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. I don't think it's directly through their Leaderosity platform, but that's like an online like learning platform. But yeah, I'll see if I can figure out what the digital platform they use is.
So for those folks who love experimenting and finding new things, there's a landing page called AppSumo. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it's constantly new apps in development. And so they usually will give a one-time, very low, forever pricing. So it's usually $50-$60. And I've done that a couple of times of like, hey, for $50, I can, see if this new app is going to like work for us, right? It's hit or miss. I'd say probably 50% of the time I find something that I would use, but AppSumo is like, I really love AppSumo.
Thank you all for your comments and feedback. I want to be conscious of the time because we have gone over, and want to thank everyone. If you could just keep these conversations going for longer than an hour, certainly. I want to just make you all aware that we are having another call in December, and believe it or not, it's the end of the year. And so with our next call, we're going to be focusing on what you do at the end of the year as you wrap up your convening, you think about feedback and other things, and also what you're doing to look ahead towards 2020 and things that you're doing to plan ahead for your convening. So you'll all receive an invite, and I'm happy to connect with you all if you have questions about this. Hopefully this call is recording, so we'll be able to share it for the folks that missed the first half. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you want to be connected to someone who's on the call, let me know, and I'm happy to introduce you. But I want to thank everyone for your time. And any other final comments before we end our time together?
I do want to say, if there were specific things that we didn't address, like Topher, we barely got into your main concern. If there was specific questions you had going to it, just email us and we'll do a little bit of research and put it in the call notes and see what we can come up with.
Good.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you in December.
Thanks all. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You will receive an